subscribe us and like us. Nice! Hi! In this episode, we'll be talking about Japanese brutality during the period of colonization. There are a list of things to talk about, so Japanese colonization was well planned, manipulative, and it was also cruel.
When the Usa Treaty was signed with Japanese force, Gojong thought the Usa Treaty was unfair. So a special envoy was dispatched to the World Peace Conference held in Hague, Netherlands, to announce the injustice of the Usa Treaty. But because of the Japanese obstruct, it failed. Japan held responsibility about the dispatches to Gojong and took away his title of Emperor of Korea.
How can Japan untitle another country's king? How can they do this?
It was not just this. Japan imposed the Japan-Korea Treaty of 1907 to appoint the Japanese as the deputy ministers of every department. Japan also dissolved the National Korean Army, giving unreasonable financial excuses. They took our king and now army. And they also made us write gyugakso. That meant our jurisdiction and police power was not ours anymore. They made groups like Ilchine, the pro-Japan group. These are Koreans who turned their backs on their own country, got great powers and fortune from Japan in return. Japan manipulated Koreans to be against each other, making the Ilchinhue signing the important document. Japan made the treaties look like a fair deal. In 1910, Japan-Korea Annexation Treaty was signed like this, even though the king didn't approve of it. The Japan-Korea Annexation Treaty meant the Korea and Japan was combined.
Our national sovereignty completely got stolen, and now Korea was a colony. Even worse, Japan lowered Sunjong from emperor to king and shamed the royal family and Korean people. Japan took Korea one by one and finally built a highest organ, the Government General of Korea, to control Korea as a colony.
Koreans resisted the Japanese, so Japan controlled Korea, strongly used armed force. Japan had its military police take charge of Korean police affairs. Even without a formal trial, Koreans were fined and flogged.
Japan stole our freedom about press, rally, association, also banned to make a group. At this time, if more than 3 Koreans were gathered, the military police would beat them up and separated them. Also, teachers were forced to wear a sword and Japanese uniform at schools to frighten children so they would learn to obey Japan.
Japan needed money to move on to other countries, so they started a land survey. In the process, Japan collected more taxes by finding land that were not recorded in their land register. The land of the royal family and government offices and village command lands were made into the ownership of Japan. Japan sold them at a bargain price to Oriental Development Company, which was also owned by the Japanese government or to Japanese people. As a result, the land owned by the Japanese greatly increased. On the other hand, the rights of Korean Farmers who had been able to cultivate land for generations were ignored.
There was an independent Korean army unit that fought against the Japanese colonial rules, which attacked the Japanese army and police stationed twice to break the Japanese army's base. Japan got angry and went to kill the independent Korean army, but it failed and they lost. Japan went furious, started to kill Koreans who were living in Kando, China in revenge. Men, women, children, elders, innocent civilians were killed by Japan. Japan burned their homes, churches, schools, and many other places.